Hello and welcome to Positivity, your weekly celebration of all things book related. This week I'm going to be talking about my TBR trolley. Yes, I have a mini librarian's trolley that stores my TBR acquisitions. Not all of these books have been published recently, but they are all books I want to get stuck into in February. The first book that I'm looking forward to reading is Outlawed by Anna North. This is Reese Witherspoon's current book club pick, which is where I first heard about it. From what I know so far, it tells the story of a young, recently married woman who is unable to have children. She's hounded out of her town and joins a group of female bandits. It's a Western, as you might be able to work out from the front cover and the font choice and bold colour scheme. My granddad used to love Westerns, although I doubt he would have had the opportunity to read a feminist twist like this. Very much looking forward to reading this book. Next is Luster by Raven Leilani. There has been a lot of hype about this book. I first heard about it on one of the final few episodes of the Hadlow podcast, but since then it has been everywhere and talked about everywhere. From what I have read and understand from the blurb, it's about a black girl living in a city who gets into a relationship with an older married white guy and finds herself involved in not only his individual life, but his marital life as well. I think it's going to explore the power dynamic between the three of them from the perspective of their relationship, their ages, and their races. Very excited to get into this. I'm split as to whether this or Outlawed will be my first read of February. Maybe Luster is going to pip it to the post. The third book that is on my TBR is The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. This book took ages to arrive at my flat after I ordered it, and I became very impatient because I've heard so many exciting things about this. Simon Savage, who's a booktuber I watch all the time and inspired me to try talking about books on YouTube, has spoken so highly of this book, and he hosted the Waterstones live event with Robert Jones Jr. It is the story of two slaves living within a plantation who fall in love with one another at a time where homosexuality wasn't even a word. That is all I really know about this book, and I've deliberately left myself in the dark because I want to discover it without any influences. Next up is a book that came out last year. It's Betty by Tiffany McDaniel. This is another book I want to go into blind. I think it's going to be a celebration of the Appalachian Mountains and the people who live there. McDaniel, in the opening preface, writes about this book as being a homage to the people living in Ohio, where she is also from, as well as where the novel is set. So I'm expecting a love story to her home. This edition also has an extra section at the end where McDaniel explores her family influence and heritage in her writing. So very excited to get to this one. Another book that was first published last year that I want to get stuck into, perhaps during the half-term holidays, is The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. This is a story of the middle sister, Mary Bennet, as she observes the narrative of Pride and Prejudice, amongst other things as well. I have to confess that I am not a massive fan of Pride and Prejudice. I'd hidden Austen module at university, and I much prefer her later writing, so I'm interested to see what Hadlow does to it. I want this book to be a wholesome, cuddly delight, so let's hope it lives up to it. I have heard very good things. This next book is an interesting one, and I discovered it after reading The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennet, which I reviewed in my last video. Passing by Nella Larsen is supposed to have been a huge influence on Bennet as she wrote The Vanishing Half. It tells the story of two friends, one of whom has totally rejected her African-American heritage and passed for white. Even her husband is totally oblivious to her heritage identity. And these two friends reacquaint themselves with one another, and I think it's an exploration of how their relationship navigates this change in that one friend's identity. It's a super slim book, and it was written during the Harlem Renaissance. I loved Bennet's novel, so I can't wait to read this and see where it goes. So down to my final three. Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud recently won the Costa Award for Best Debut Novel. The paperback edition came out in mid-January, and I've managed to get my hands on a copy of it. From what I have heard, it's the story of a woman trying to find love after coming out of a hugely abusive, both emotionally and physically abusive marriage. It's supposed to be incredibly optimistic as a novel, which sounds crazy given the summary that I have just given. So I'm really looking forward to how that narrative emerges. Penultimately, My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell was published last year but recently came out in paperback. It is a story of a woman who was in a relationship, and I use that term loosely, with her teacher. As a teacher myself, this could potentially be quite an uncomfortable one, but I've heard such good things about it. So many authors that I admire, so many critics that I admire, have read it and given reviews for this paperback edition. So I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. Finally, the book that I'm perhaps most intrigued by, but also most intimidated by, is Weather by Jenny Offill. I have no idea what to expect from this book at all. All I know is that it was shortlisted for the Women's Prize. I think it brings together lots of narratives about living in the USA today, maybe under Trump's presidency, and that being a focus area. It'll be an interesting one after my love of Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld, which I reviewed in my last video. That maybe I went a bit OTT in showing my love of. I'd be interested to see how the narratives are different. They're very different novels, very different structures, very different focus, but it would just be interesting to see if there are any areas for comparison and linking there. So that is my TBR trolley for the end of January. Join me next week to see how I got on with that. I've not set myself a mega task at all, I'm sure. See you soon.